Hi everybody, this is going to be a video about a book called Leading at the Edge, Leadership Lessons from the Extraordinary Saga of Shackleton's Antarctic Expedition. And it's basically about how to lead when things are crazy. So in 1914, the Antarctic had been visited but was largely unexplored. And there was a man named Ernest Shackleton who had a dream of taking a crew of men and crossing the Antarctic. That's the North Pole. That's where Santa lives. And the Antarctic is at the South Pole, and that's where the penguins live. So, that's what our story is about. That's Shackleton, and when he put together his crew, he carefully selected about 27 men from all different backgrounds to do a variety of jobs. And once he'd gotten them all together, he set sail from South Georgia in December of 1914 on a boat that he named the Endurance. In January of 1915, they got a little bit closer to the Antarctic, but they ran into some ice. And this was a problem. Eventually, the ice started to spread, and that was scary for the crew because they couldn't go anywhere, so they couldn't get to the Antarctic. They tried to get rid of the ice, but it was a futile attempt, basically. And eventually the ice started to crack the hull of the ship, and after a while, on October 27th, 1915, the ship cracked and everyone was forced to leave. So this was a problem because now they were stuck on all this ice and they couldn't get to Antarctica and they couldn't get home. So they started to try and drag their lifeboats across the ice, looking for open water so that they might be able to sail back to South Georgia. They had trouble with this because even as they left, they couldn't get across the ice. They spent an entire day lugging these ships around and only made it about 2 miles. So they decided to set up camp on the ice and hope that eventually they would be able to reach the open water just by floating around on the ice floe. And they called that Ocean Camp, and they stayed there for quite a long time, as you can see. One night, Shackleton came out of his tent, and he had an uneasy feeling. He saw the ice crack, and one of his crew members had actually fallen in, and he was able to save him. Eventually, the crew was able to make it to open water. This was very exciting because they were able to actually use their lifeboats that they'd been lugging around all over the place. So they set sail looking for land. Eventually, they made it to this place called Elephant Island. It was uninhabited, except for penguins. And there were penguin droppings all over the place. But it was dry land, and that was a good place for them to be. So they set up camp there. Eventually, Shackleton had to make the decision to take a small group and split everybody up and go out on his own to try and make it back to South Georgia because they were running out of food and they didn't have anything to eat. He finally made it back to South Georgia on May 10th, 1916. And there he got together a group of men and made 3 attempts and was finally able to get through the ice and make it back to Elephant Island to rescue all of his crew. And his crew was never worried that he wouldn't save them if he got back because they knew how much he loved him. So they said bye to the penguins and they left. So, Perkins, the guy who wrote the book, made 10 strategies for leadership in situations like this, but maybe just rough situations in general that you might come across as a leader. And the first strategy is to never lose sight of the ultimate goal and focus energy on short-term objectives. So Perkins mentioned that Shackleton started the expedition with one clear and focused main goal to cross Antarctica on foot. Although this goal was never achieved by Shackleton, he was able to alter his goal and his plan so that he could make sure that everyone involved was able to make it home alive. Shackleton also made a large variety of short-term goals, which allowed the crew members the opportunity to focus on less stressful and more manageable tasks. Strategy 2 was to set a personal example with visible, memorable symbols and behaviors. Shackleton led his crew by showing them how he expected them to behave. For example, when he asked them all to lighten their loads by disposing of anything that wasn't absolutely necessary for the trek back to open water, he symbolically reached into his parka and threw all of his coins and a gold cigarette case into the snow. This showed his followers that he was willing to sacrifice as much as he was asking them to in order to reach their ultimate goal. And here, they're just all clinging together. Strategy 3 was to instill optimism and self-confidence, but to stay grounded in reality. Shackleton possessed an innate ability to remain positive, even when everything looked bleak. Because of this, he was able to inspire and motivate his crew to continue forward and hope for the best. Despite this, Shackleton was never so positive that he was delusional, allowing him to continue making rational decisions that helped everyone to make it home. And there he is, consoling somebody and being positive. Strategy 4 is to take care of yourself, maintain your stamina, and let go of guilt. This was perhaps the most challenging thing for Shackleton, as he often found himself keeping watch while his men slept. He felt that he had a duty to do this because sleep was so difficult to come by. He recognized that this was a problem, but he had trouble giving it up. Perkins asserts that this guideline is important to follow because the leader should also avoid running him or herself down, since it trickles down to hurt the team as a whole. Like if you're angry and you take it out on your crew, then they're going to be angry too. So, strategy 5 is to reinforce the team message constantly. Even before the Endurance went down, Shackleton was looking for a way that his diverse crew might find a shared identity. Every night after dinner, he would call them all together for a meeting. There, they would laugh, sing, talk, and forge the social bonds that became so important once times became more trying. Strategy 6 is to minimize status differences and insist on courtesy and mutual respect. One morning, Shackleton forced his breakfast biscuit upon one of his crew members. This gesture showed that he did not feel that being a leader made him more important or more deserving than the others. He saw that someone needed something that he could provide, and he shared it. The crew member later wrote in his diary that the effect this had was not only profound, it would never be forgotten. Strategy 7 is to master conflict, deal with anger in small doses, engage dissidents, and avoid needless power struggles. Shackleton encouraged his men to keep him updated with any information about disagreements or arguments among the crew. This gave him the chance to stay ahead of any outbursts or upheavals. Still, Shackleton understood that his men needed to release their anger in small doses, so he allowed them to bicker about small differences throughout the day. Strategy 8 is to find something to celebrate and something to laugh about. The crew of the Endurance had a celebration for every little thing they could think of to celebrate. They had a dog derby day with dog sled races, and they celebrated any little British national holiday. They even celebrated the 1-year anniversary of the day they set sail, regardless of the fact that they should have been headed home by then. This helped to keep the crew's spirits up and their minds away from problems facing them. Strategy 9 is to be willing to take the big risk. Shackleton and his crew had many opportunities over the course of their stay on the ice floes to launch their lifeboats into the water and try to paddle for dry land. Often, Shackleton would take the risk, or would not take the risk. He wisely decided to stay on the ice for fear that it would close up again. These were risks that he calculated and found to be unnecessary and dangerous. Still, Shackleton's cautiousness was tested when the opportunity arose for him to split up the group. Strategy 10 is to never give up. The main story of the crew of Endurance's survival is simply one of persistence. When they hit snags in the plan, they didn't give up. They simply changed the plan. Even when everything was against him, Shackleton was able to boost morale and alter his goals so that he was able to lead his team to safety. And that's the end. Thank you for watching.